Good morning,
Hi.
8:15 everyone. It is Thursday, it is Friday Junior, it is almost Friday.
Friday Junior.
Ugh, I love this. You have weekend plans, Cornelia?
No,
Kicking
I'm
it.
just going to kick it, catch up on my shows. That's it.
That's about it?
Yeah, that's it.
What
Maybe
shows
go
are
to the
you-
gym.
Go to the
yoga or something.
gym.
Yeah.
Okay, see, this is what I love about Cornelia. She just likes to kick it and catch up on her shows. I'll be on a plane again in Las Vegas. So busy weeks ahead.
Tell us about the last time in
Yeah,
Vegas.
we will go there. Vegas. What happens there? No, I don't even say that. No, because it always comes home.
Sure.
It always comes home. You post on social media and all that good stuff. A good time. What are you guys doing this weekend? Let me know. Right now in the comments below, we're tracking your comments, what you have to say. And I know you've probably heard by now. If not, we're going to break it to you. 91 years old, Hugh Hefner has died, and this happened yesterday. We got the news when I got the alert finally, because I don't know exactly the time he passed, but when the media was alerted, and then it came through the wires, and then us, you know, we're all just normal people. We get the alerts on our phones, like all of you, when we're not here at the station. I wasn't shocked because at 91 years old, you kind of go, okay, he's nearing the end of his life, but you are kind of moved because you think, wow, an icon in his own right has passed away. Someone who has affected a lot of lives, whether it be negatively or positively. And for a lot of people, in the reaction we're seeing online was very positive. There are those feminists, there are those people who go, was he an icon? Someone who objectified the female body? Is that something to celebrate? Others are saying females chose to be in these positions as Playboy bunnies for so many years that it's actually a form of power to use your body in a way that you can say, hey, this is it. I'm objectifying my own body, if that's what you want to call it. So chime in right now. How do you feel about Hugh Hefner? But the facts here are that he passed away and that he did change a lot of lives. And I will say, as someone who knew him, you know, I'm of a certain age and I didn't know all of the rich history from his past, how he was an advocate of equal equality in our country and equal rights, how he was an advocate of women's rights when it comes to the reproductive system. The list goes on and on. You actually had some stories that you recalled from
Well, not
the
recall
past.
because I wasn't alive.
Well, you weren't alive, but you recalled learning from the past.
As I'm the same age as Hugh Hefner. So a couple of facts. Again, like Megan said, Playboy was one of the magazines, the only magazines that in a way featured black people the same way that white people were, and not in regards to the nudity, but when you talk about interviews, the interview with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the interview published in Playboy was one of the longest published interviews ever, written by Alex Haley, who was the writer of the autobiography of Malcolm X and Roots. Everybody knows Roots. So Alex Haley was brought on by Hugh Hefner. He also was tasked with interviewing one of the leaders of, at that point, the KKK, and I can get the man's exact name, but so Hugh Hefner was the head of the Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell. And he summoned Alex Haley to do that interview for that magazine as well. So, and on top of other things, so Hugh was always kind of in the mix of what was going on. He gave Dick Gregory a platform and put him on TV when, at the time, other entertainers of color weren't allowed in that space. Who also passed this year. The first black Playmate of the year was a black woman. Her name was Gina Bryams. And again, you got to remember, another one, Darian Stern is the first black woman to cover Playboy. And you keep in mind, Sports Illustrated didn't put a black woman on the cover until 1996, Tyra Banks. So when you talk about, you know, just being a step ahead, and some people may have a problem with that because it's a magazine that's based on nudity. But you could argue, as women in America and in the world, when have we ever had control of our sexuality and our bodies without the say-so of a man, or without some type of authoritative figure saying what we want to do is wrong? Because when you talk about sexuality, men can do what they want without a stigma. But if a woman does the same thing, some may argue it's frowned upon. So so it's just, as far as pushing the envelope, you know, Hugh was kind of before his time, but then there are some people who don't think that.
Right, and there's bunny turned journalist. You guys would know her, feminist Gloria Steinem, and this is also stuff I'm learning this morning. She was very much so against what Hefner was doing, I guess, after she became a bunny, right? Because obviously if she was once it, you choose to be that. And then when she became a journalist, and in the end she was saying, you know, these women were poorly educated, they were overworked by him, they were underpaid by him, and she doesn't call it erotic, but she says this was pornographic. And as a feminist, she was trying to defend the women, and there are people who have come out, there are bunnies who have come out after gaining all of the fame, after being part of the show, Girls Next Door, after gaining all of that, right, recognition. They come out and say, oh, well, we actually didn't have control of our schedule. They were basically, in their opinions, like sex slaves. And so when you hear those stories, you think, okay, yes, those are dark times in our country. That still does exist. And so it's hard. I was interested yesterday when I heard this. I was interested to see the reaction online because I didn't know which way our society is going to lean, because people right away want to go Hugh Hefner because he is such a name. And then you learn these things about him and you go, okay, when it comes down to pop culture, he called it the sexual revolution. He feels as though that, you know, he was a game changer. And actually in a CBS article I was reading, they had an interview with him a couple of years ago when he was nearing his 90s, and they said, what do you want to be remembered for, right? A common question you ask people as they near the end of their lifetime. And he said, as someone who played an important part in changing the social sexual values of my time, and as an advocate for race equality, gay rights, changing of drug laws, and reproductive rights to women. Talking about Roe versus Wade, how he was around during that time on the right side of that part of history. And also we were talking about how there was in Miami, one of the Playboy strip clubs, he had mentioned, or I was reading or listening to another interview where they had at one point said no, black patrons cannot come to inside the club. And so that is when Hefner had to go, wait a minute, we're all equal here, which was at the time revolutionary, if you will. And so he had to step in and say, no, we're actually going to allow African Americans to patronize. And he did, and you see video of him and MLK and him and others as part of that. So I think that is something that is so powerful that I didn't really know about Hef. I think the common perception of people my age are, oh, he was this guy who wore a satin robe and just loved to kiss women and have sex with younger women.
Because the narrative has changed. We got to think about it too. Back then, when porn first came out, and even if it was considered porn at the time, yes, it was game changing and it was very risque, and it caused a lot of issues. People, you know, the conversation of, because back then, if you didn't have skirts to the knees, you were, you know, considered to be, you weren't being ladylike. But you got to remember, everything was on the table at that time. So yes, black people couldn't go to certain restaurants. Hugh stepped in. Yes, he gave access to interviews with different types of people. But again, to me, it just signals it just signals a time where you could just do whatever you could just take that risk. And now with Hugh Hefner being who he is and who we see him in the media as of before his passing, the conversation around pornography has changed where it's more common. So we probably wouldn't hear about a lot of the game-changing things, because you could just pull up porn on your phone, or you could just Google Playboy magazine, or just walk into a 7-Eleven. Even do they even have them on the shelves anymore? And just take a look at the magazines. So the conversation probably shifted because talking about that is normal. Has become more normalized. It's become normalized.
I mean, the first magazine came out in 1953. Hef was 27 years old. I mean, that was, when I think about it, someone to start a magazine like that was young. And to have been able to have this sort of longevity in the business for him all the way up till 91 years old. Yeah, he was still living in the Playboy Mansion. And I remember in recent years, the Playboy Mansion was going up for sale. And part of the sale was that he came with it. Hef was like, no, this is me and the Grotto are in the same playing field. And so he had whoever was going to purchase the Playboy Mansion, which it ended up being purchased, he would have a section of it as his own home, because to him that was his house. And fortunately, I guess for me as someone who works in news but also in the entertainment industry, as an entertainment reporter, had a chance to cover one of the last big parties at the Playboy Mansion. And it's pretty cool, as part of pop culture. Very crowded. There were no bunnies there, and you never saw Hef come out of the house. But it was for some charity event. But I saw Joy Behar in an interview from years ago had called it the White House of the West. Everyone knows, like, the Playboy Mansion. He has a big Halloween party every year. That has become so popular in, like, the LA scene. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what comes of his passing, and his son, from my understanding, is taking over Playboy Enterprise. Enterprise.
Okay, and then we have a couple of viewer comments.
Okay.
Pamela Plamondon, and again, if I butcher y'all's names, I be doing
It's
the most.
Thursday.
It's Thursday. He lived his life the way he wanted to, as we all should. May he rest in peace. Janet Piper, wow, there's an end of an era. Rest in peace, Hugh Hefner. Kimberly Morgan, last night I was organizing my DVDs. Yes, I still own those and had the biggest urge to watch House Bunny. And then a few hours later, she found out that Hugh passed. And then David Wong, just thinking about how I can talk about the Playboy and Penthouse collection I had when I was 13 and not sound misogynistic. Nope, it's not working. Yep. So again, even if that wasn't your thing, one of those magazines, Playboy is one of those magazines, everybody's heard of it. Whether you've heard of it in a negative way, whether you've heard of it in a positive way, whether you even heard of it, or, because you remember on Forrest Gump when Jenny posed in the magazine, whether it's even in movies, inserted in that way where she got kicked out of school because she posed in her college sweater. It was inserted, it's been inserted throughout pop culture and in our lives forever. And even if you've never looked inside of a Playboy magazine, you know what Playboy magazine is.
Yeah. Well, Hugh went on the record and said that originally he was going to call it Stag Party. That's what the original name of the magazine was going to be, Stag Party, but he said he decided to class it up a bit with Playboy. Still want to get to the root of why Playboy. I mean, I guess you can kind of, you know, come to your own conclusions and the bunny ears and all of that. But we saw Jenny McCarthy, who was one of the bunnies. Kim Kardashian, I guess, was involved. I don't ever remember, I guess she posed for Playboy, but I don't remember her being like, oh, Kim Kardashian, oh yes, the Playboy bunny. There are people in our history, in Playboy history, who have been known for being one of the iconic bunnies, Holly Madison being one of them, who's written books in years past, or years after her time as one of the Playmates, and goes on the record and says, you know, there were kind of trying times once she got involved in it and became part of the contract, under contract, and I had a chance, you know, to catch up with her about that in recent years, and they weren't the best years for her. So I haven't heard from her on social media yet. I haven't seen her post anything, but Jenny McCarthy was in tears in a video saying, you changed my life. Having lived in Vegas, it's a place that Hef is known for frequenting, and there are a lot of people in Vegas saying, wow, remember the Playboy, it was the club at Palms Casino Resort? Yeah. And because of the way that times are changing, you know, I don't think young boys are necessarily purchasing the magazine anymore because, like you were saying, go online and find that. The franchise had to change a bit and had to evolve with the times. And do you remember, all of you remember in recent years, they said they were going to stop showing nude photos in the magazine. Oh,
I think I do remember that.
And then I think they went back to doing it, but we were all like, but what's Playboy?
People were like, well, then what's the, people were like, well, that's the magazine. But again, people forgot and they weren't around when there were actually groundbreaking interviews in Playboy magazine, because again, you talking about
Marlon
Brando, the guy that I mentioned who was the head of the American Nazi Party. You had Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. So
Sinatra, and then Nancy Sinatra came out and
if you don't remember, like, and we weren't around, me and Megan, when that was happening, but if you don't know the history of interviews in Playboy magazine, then you would be like, well, what else is the magazine going to have? What else did he do?
I gained a lot of respect, I will say, for Hugh Hefner, sadly, in his passing, but that is part of it, right? You learn more about a person when that happens.
But this is the question, but then this is a good topic, because a lot of people are on both sides of this, because like Megan was saying, some people feel a certain way about...
I came in this morning, didn't I feel in a certain way?
Feel a certain way because of maybe the stigma around Hugh Hefner versus other people who are just like, well, he did some good things along the way. So does this challenge us to figure out if someone has done questionable things in their life, does that negate or erase their legacy on paper? So is your resume affected by who you are as a man or a woman?
Let's bring up Bill Cosby, who was a friend of Hugh Hefner. And that's a hard question to answer, I think, because as a human being, right?
Does your idea of Bill Cosby change how you feel about Cliff Huxtable? because they're two different people.
And it hurts. It hurts because you don't want to think of them in that light, but you got to, because that's the reality, right? He was a character on a show, but also at the time was a game changer. Would you say that?
Oh, absolutely. The Cosby Show was the first television show that, as a whole, represented the black family in a non-negative light. But then continuing on, taking Bill and Hugh and everybody off the table. Everybody has a personal life, and a lot of people have passed. So then, going forward, will that always draw the line or the question? Does your resume take a hit if you've done questionable things in your personal life or in your past?
It's a stain. I think I'm able to separate it in my head. Is Bill Cosby someone I'm going to want to, when I see, run up and hug and kiss on the cheek and be like, oh my gosh, yes, you were such a huge pop culture icon. Unfortunately, not, because of the recent findings of his past. But see, the difference, I think, with Bill Cosby is that he was a character that was endured. So even if he was the worst person in the world, which some will call him that, in real life, you can still be in love with the character and I think separate it. With Hugh Hefner, his life was his reality. There was no show here. I mean, he may have hyped it up of like, oh, wanting the bunnies, but that was him and that was real life, and he had a reality show. So it's harder
Which
to
I never
separate.
really watched. Did you watch the show?
Girls Next Door, no, and that's when the whole Holly Madison thing happened. I was not
really
one. I
watched
didn't
it.
like sit down and watch it, but of our generation, yeah, people were fans of that show. Like, they were locked into some show on MTV. I mean, people were locked into the show and would watch. It wasn't my thing. But I think because I grew up where I don't think I was old enough to separate sex as being something that's adults do, and it's not something you go like, ew, sex. You know, I was still like a kid, so I wasn't watching that for entertainment. I didn't understand and wrap my head around it. That was too adult for me.
Okay. So David Wong said they did stop printing new photos, Megan. Then they brought them back earlier this year with a pictorial of Scarlett Byrne. I don't know how to pronounce his name. She was in the Harry Potter movies. Okay, cool. Because, there was a conversation about them getting rid of the nudies.
Because they wanted to keep up with the times, because I think in today's society, there are women of our generation who are being like, okay, no, you can't mistreat our body, you can't objectify our body and us not say anything about it unless we are doing it. It's this new wave of feminism, right? Where people are more identifying it as not something as, oh, women who are just waving their bras and trying to be like so in your face about women being better than men. That's not feminism. And I think this generation, or at least I hope, as I've become an adult, it's become more clear to me what feminism is. It's just wanting the equal rights of men and women. And I think if you're not considered a feminist, it's sort of like, well, then so you think men are better than we, and we get in there, and that's a whole different conversation. But I can see why Playboy Enterprises wanted to switch it up and say, okay, how can we still sell? Because it's a business at the end of the day. It's a business. So if they're not, as society changes, you got to change the way you print too. But what I love, and Marcus Allen had posted something earlier, is that, sorry, Mom, I bought Playboy magazine back in the day because of the articles. And that has been a running joke for a long time, but there were really good write-ups in there.
Good write-ups.
The way they were able to do both in the same magazine is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and that his legacy will live on. So Hugh Hefner, may he rest in peace.
In peace. That's crazy. I never thought, Hugh Hefner